Okay, we are going to start the second Dhamma sermon. So may you give your consent by saying Sadhu Sadhu. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Pancako ime bharadwaja dhamma ditteva dhamme dvidha vipaka katame pancha saddha ruci anussavo akara parivitakko ditti nijjhana kanti iti. Dear Venerable Brother, dear Venerable Sisters, Dhamma friends. So yesterday actually we have started discussing Canki Sutta as the theme of this retreat. If you can remember, Canki is one of the very well-known Brahmin teacher, and he is coming to meet the Buddha. And Buddha at that time residing at a village called Opasada, and the Opasada village has a kind of a forest called Devavana and Salavana. So the same, both names are being used, and good reputation of the Buddha was spreading, and many groups of Brahmins are coming to meet the Buddha, see the Buddha, and that is being noticed by Brahmin Canki, and he too decided to go to the Buddha. And some others tried to stop him, but he didn't accept that. He was able to convince other Brahmins, and ultimately he decided to go with his fellow students, 300 students, to meet the Buddha. That is how the background story. So basically now Buddha and the elder Brahmins are going through a kind of a discussion. And while that discussion was going on, there was one 16-year-old Brahmin youth called Karpatika, and he was quite enthusiastic about participating to this kind of discussion. Even when the Buddha and the elderly Brahmins are discussing, so he couldn't wait. So time to time, he is interrupting the discussion. And then Buddha had to refute him, Buddha has to restrain him, and Buddha is asking him to wait. It is not proper to disturb when the elders are in a discussion. So you got to wait till your time comes. So by the way, interestingly, the Canki, being the teacher, he actually come forward and he actually talk on behalf of this Brahmin youth, Karpatika. And he mentioned this Karpatika, even though he is just 16 years old, he is really a brilliant student, and he has already mastered the 3 Vedas, and he is also coming from the good family. So likewise, many good points regarding the Karpatika is mentioned by Canki. And then, by the way, Karpatika was thinking, yes, it is not proper to interrupt this discussion. I better wait till Buddha look at me. So whenever Buddha look at me, I may think that is the time, this is the time for me to participate in the discussion. So let me wait till that happens. Then Buddha knew his decision, and when the proper times arrive, then Buddha looks at him, and then Karpatika comes to the picture. The whole sutta actually evolved based on various questions asked by Karpatika, and those are very interesting, and again give a fair account of Buddha's teaching as well, and how he is encouraging others to go for kind of an open investigation, and how he is presenting his Buddha's teaching. So likewise, there are many interesting areas that we can explore by investigating this sutta. So what this Karpatika asking from Buddha is with respect to their own Brahmanic teachings, Brahmanic hymns, we can say. So he is telling that the Brahmanic hymns are coming from various teachers, and now the others are faithfully accepting all those Brahmanic hymns, teachings, and they accept that this is the truth and everything else is false. What do you think about that? So this is the question he is asking from the Buddha. And then Buddha mentioned, whoever telling these teachings, whoever preaching these teachings, are they sort of mentioning that they really have understood those teachings and they have really experienced those teachings? Have they really realized those teachings? Are they making such a claim and then declaring this is the only truth, everything else is false? And when Buddha put this question to Kapattika, he honestly has to say no. So they are not claiming that they themselves have experienced these teachings, they themselves have realized these teachings. As a result of that, everything else is false, this is the only truth. So none of them are claiming like that. And then Buddha further questions, and Buddha questions even to the next previous generations, the teachers of these teachers. Till the 7th generation, have ever one of them claimed like that? Then Kapattika had to accept that none of them has claimed like that. And even Buddha go to the very beginning of the teachings, Brahmanic teachings, and he says that different names are given, who are the composers of these teachings, Brahmanic teachings, who are the creators of these Brahmanic teachings. Even none of them have claimed that they have really understood that, they have really realized that through their own knowledge, and therefore it is the only truth and everything else is false. So none of them have really made such a definite conclusion. So therefore Buddha mentioned, and actually that question is asked from Kapattika, and Kapattika himself is answering no, they haven't even declared like that. So then Buddha say, then actually your acceptance of this teaching is based on kind of a blind faith. It is not well grounded, and it is very much like a blind lineage that you are following. So once this is mentioned by the Buddha, now Kapattika seems a bit troubled, and he wants to put another reason why they are following. Now he is putting another reason, which is called coming from oral tradition, and now they are going through repeated recitation of these teachings. As a result of that, now they are following what is called anussava. And when this is mentioned by Kapattika, Buddha mentioned, previously you said about the faith, now you are talking about this oral tradition. But there are 5 kinds of categories or 5 kinds of grounds that we can in general look at coming to a development of the knowledge widely available, but you can't come to a definite conclusion even using any of these 5. Panchako ime bharadwaja dhamma ditteva dhamme dvidha vipaka. So there are 5 categories of teachings. Within this life, within present moment, it can have 2 kinds of results. So what are the 2? Either they can be true, either they can be false. So what are those 5? Saddha, that is the faith. Ruchi, that is your preference or your desire. Anussavo, that is through repeated hearing. Then akara parivitakka, so that is repeated reflection, your own rational reflection. And then the dittinijjhana kanti, so that is there is kind of a view and you yourself do a kind of a reflection and accept that particular view is true. So these are the 5 categories that Buddha mentioned in this sutta, which are widely available to come to a kind of a conclusion, to come to a possibility of attaining, say, knowledge. But here Buddha points out, still you have to maintain kind of an open mind. So let's go through these 5 because they are quite valid to us as well. Now, saddha. So widely known factor, saddha, is relevant to us. Now we as Buddhists, so we are quite faithful on Buddha's teaching. We are quite faithful on the Buddha and again the Sangha. So likewise there are many Saddha related, faith related factors involved in Buddha Sasana as well, in this Buddha's teaching as well. And if you consider various other religious groups, so that is available in those religions as well. So they also have faith about their teachers, they also have faith regarding their teachings, and they also have faith regarding the follower of the teachings. It is not unique to Buddhism. So therefore, probably in this kind of situation, so at the beginning, so we also have kind of a blind faith. So because we ourselves haven't realized things, so we assume that things are correct. We assume that Buddha is the completely self-enlightened person. We assume that Arahants are enlightened. We assume that teachings are correct. So likewise, it is based on kind of a faith. And interestingly, so here there are certain significant components that we can take for our practice as well. Now, probably you have heard about a term called Saddhanusari. So, a person who is a faith follower. So, there is a person who actually have a kind of a strong faith on Buddha's teaching. It is not mere kind of on the Buddha, but the Buddha's teaching, he has a strong faith. And Buddha actually has looked at him in a more positive manner. So therefore, there's a strong position for Saddha in this Buddha's teaching. And in this, there are many suttas actually explaining the Saddhanusari. For example, in the Okkanti Samyutta, in Samyutta Nikaya, Buddha explained several suttas. For example, in the Anicca Chakku Sutta. So Buddha mentioned this eye is impermanent and it is changing and it is coming to something different every time, every moment. And similarly, the ears, nose, tongue, body, mind, things are constantly changing, impermanent, inconstant, and changing and become otherwise. And on the other hand, if you consider Khanda Sutta, in the same group, so Buddha mentioned this rupa, that is in the form aggregate, is constantly changing, impermanent, inconstant. The feeling aggregate is constantly changing. The perceptions are constantly changing, becoming otherwise. And then, formations aggregate, sankhara, so those are also changing, constantly changing. And then the consciousness aggregate also changing. So likewise, many different teachings are there where Buddha talks about the impermanence and the changing, and they become otherwise. Now, someone will hear that teaching and someone will have faith on that teaching. So there are terms like yo bhikkave ime dhamme evang saddhati adhimucchati ayang uccati saddhanusari okkanto sammatta niyama. So Buddha mentioned, so when Buddha teaches about these kinds of vipassana related or insight related teachings, there may be a person who actually trusts that, who actually have faith on that. And as a result of that, he come to a kind of a conclusion, yes, it should be correct. Now, here actually we have to think about something called the faculties, indriya. So it is not mere blind faith. Now, there are certain 5 faculties Buddha mentioned, which actually we have to try to develop. 5 faculties. Saddha, Viriya, Sati, Samadhi, Panya. Saddha is the faith. Viriya, the effort. Sati, mindfulness. Samadhi, concentration. And Panya, the wisdom. Now, just knowing these factors or just, recalling these factors is not the important thing, and how to experience these factors by ourselves, at least to some extent. So what is saddha? So how you feel when the faculty saddha is available in your mind? And what is, say, effort? How you feel when effort is available in your mind. And what is mindfulness? How you feel when mindfulness is available, functioning in your mind. And what is samadhi? Concentration. How you feel when concentration is available, when mind is concentrated. And what is panya? Wisdom. How you feel when wisdom is operating in your mind. So these are things that we have to reflect within ourselves. So therefore, it is not mere kind of blind faith here actually Buddha talks, rather something that we need to reflect within ourselves, at least to some extent. Okay, I have kind of a faith faculty developed. I have some amount of faith about the Buddha, some amount of faith about the Dhamma, Sangha, etc. And you feel that, you are feeling that. Sometimes you feel the faith coming in the front. It's the dominant factor. And sometimes, say, you are more effortful, you have a lot of energy to practice, you are waking up early and you have a lot of energy and you are sitting for several hours maybe, you are practicing diligently and you are more enthusiastic. So that is where the factor energy, the virya is fairly predominant in the mind. And then the mindfulness, sati, say as we develop, so probably you can understand, okay, today I have continuous mindfulness. Each and every task I was able to conduct mindfully. So likewise you may understand. So at the beginning you don't know what is mindfulness, but as we continue to develop, you may understand, yes, there is something called mindfulness. Now some amount of mindfulness is available in the mind. I can do a particular task mindfully, but still there are certain other tasks I can't do mindfully. So that indicates, as a faculty, you are able to understand a kind of a difference. At this particular time, I had mindfulness, but on another occasion, I didn't have mindfulness. So you, within your own mind, you have understood kind of a spiritual quality called mindfulness, sati. And then the concentration, say samadhi. So typically our minds are scattered, jumping from this to the other. How about making it little quiet, little concentrated, little collected, and you are keeping it consistently on a particular object. So if you have that capacity, then you understand, okay, something has changed. I can maintain my attention on a selected object for a long time. So during that time, mind is not distracted, fully concentrated on a particular selected object. So you recognize within your mind kind of a quality called concentration. So as I mentioned yesterday, these things are not permanent. They are also evolving. But as a practitioner, you understand, okay, there is something called samadhi, something called concentration, which I didn't know before I start practicing. But now I know there is something kind of a faculty, kind of a quality now available in my mind. Sometimes when I am practicing, my mind get fairly tranquil. My mind get fairly concentrated. I can maintain my attention on a particular object for a considerable period of time. During that time, there are no distractions at all. So likewise, you become more confident. There is something called concentration. And then if you consider wisdom, so that is not the book knowledge here, what we are talking. Mostly here, the kind of penetrative wisdom available in the mind. So how we are capable of deeply looking at something without stopping at the superficial level, how we are capable of deeply looking at something. Say for example, when we look at the breath, at the beginning it is just in breath, then out breath, just rising, just falling, just left, just right. So likewise it is very conventional. But later, when the mindfulness is established, so if we are very much trying to investigate, so what are the qualities or properties of the breathing? So whether the in-breath is longer or shorter, whether the out-breath is longer or shorter, whether it is warmer or cooler, where it is exactly touching. So likewise, it's a kind of a investigative quality that we are developing. It is not that we are remembering so many information and coloring the experience. Rather, we are developing kind of investigative quality in the mind. So that is the one going to actually developed to the Yoniso Manasikara, which is capable of looking at the causes, deeply looking at what are the conditioning factors, without just stopping at the surface. So this deep looking or penetrative knowledge, penetrative type of investigation is what going to develop this panya. So sometimes you may understand, yes, there is a possibility. So when different, say, sensations are arising, so my mind is now capable of looking at them carefully, investigating them carefully. So now mind has that capacity. Now when you are continuing a practice, so you may now understand, okay, these are the 5 faculties as a result of the practice I have developed. Previously, actually, we didn't have these faculties, maybe to some extent. But now you recognize within your mind, okay, there is saddha, there is viriya, there is sati, there is samadhi, there is panya. Time to time they come forward, time to time they become more strong, and sometimes they become weak. So likewise, you within your own mind can understand. So therefore, the saddhanusari, what Buddha refers here, it is not mere blind faith, rather within yourself, to some extent, you have developed these different faculties, and the faith faculty is much stronger. And with that faith faculty, you come to a kind of to some extent, to a kind of a conclusion that yes, Buddha's teaching is correct. So things are impermanent. All the aggregates are impermanent. They are constantly changing. They every time become something different. So that is where Buddha define or give kind of a credit to this saddhanusari, the faith follower. But on the other hand, there may be other religions or other teachings. I mean, such kind of an investigation is not maybe allowed or encouraged, rather simply accepting things as they are and discarding everything as false. So that kind of faith is also available in various other situations. But here, Buddha's teaching, and he encourages this kind of factual type of saddha. So actually we have another chance to discuss this when we are talking another area. Anyway, so this is saddhanusari, and therefore there's a great relevance in this area. And even when saddha is available, so Buddha mentioned, still don't think that you are completely achieved the truth. So saddha is available, faith is available, you have kind of a trust, but still something more to do. So therefore, all these 5 categories Buddha mentioned are relevant to kind of protecting the truth. If you believe that the truth, Buddha's teaching is the truth, yes, you need to protect it, you need to safeguard it. And how are you going to do it? So you are becoming faithful, you become likewise, practice, but maintaining kind of an open mind, because you yourself haven't come to the direct touch of the whole thing, direct touch of the truth. So kind of a trust that you are maintaining regarding the teaching after developing these faculties to some extent, not to the completion. Now that is related to the saddha in the Buddha's teaching. Now the second one, that is called ruchi, conviction through personal preference. Now we all have different preferences. I like this, I like that color, I like this teaching, I like that teacher, I like that political party. So why do you like that? So why you prefer that? So all these preferences, all our likes have kind of a influence coming from our different traits, from our kind of conditioning. So how you develop your childhood, who are the people that you have associated, what is your culture, the political background, your learning, your education, your parents, your friends. So many influencing factors are there, and that actually condition our mind to have kind of a preference, have kind of a desire. So therefore we can't say I like it. It is merely because of my own liking, because of my own desire. Rather, the desire is fairly conditioned from so many other influential factors. So when you are saying, okay, it is my decision, this is my preference, this is my desire, it is not a kind of a really a pure statement, because your desire, your preference being influenced by so many other external factors. And there are very interesting things, say, when you look at something, and typically we have kind of a wrong notion that things are permanent. When we are looking at something, we may have a kind of a notion that it may give me happiness, kind of satisfaction, and I may have kind of a control. So that is why I like it. I am being attracted to that. So we all have different kind of preferences. Some of you may like listening music, some may another like sports. So we all have different types of desires, our ambitions. So those are different. And as I said, those are being conditioned by so many other influential factors. So based on that, assume that you are selecting a particular teaching. So this should be the teaching. I am selecting it because I like it. So how are we going to say what I like have the truth and what I don't like don't have the truth? So this is the argument Buddha mentioning here. Panchako ime bharadwaja dhamma ditteva dhamme dvidha vipaka. So it can be either have the truth or either not have the truth. Even though I like it, it might have the truth or it might not have the truth. Even though I don't like it, it might have the truth. So therefore, the argument Buddha makes here is quite valid. So our personal preferences is fairly biased and could be wrong. And preference does not really is a kind of a factor judging that our preference definitely going to have the truth. By the way, now here, Buddha is talking about preserving the truth. Now suppose you like Buddha's teaching. You like another one's teaching. As a result of that, you are studying. So that actually helps to preserve the truth. So therefore, Buddha encourages here, now if you like it, okay, you study that. You go through it. You ponder about it. You try to investigate that. But keep an open mind. Because you yourself haven't really realized that. So till you come to the realization, so maintain kind of a open mind. It doesn't mean that you are looking down what you like. It doesn't mean that you always doubtful. Rather, you really like it, so you love it and you are continuing your investigation, continuing your, say, learning of that particular teaching because you really like it. That is your preference. And that has real value, but maintain kind of an open mind. Now, here actually there is another teaching that I like to connect where Buddha talks about vipallasa. So if our mind is somewhat distorted, so if our perception is somewhat distorted, based on that distorted perception we are thinking, and ultimately we come to a wrong kind of a thought process, what we call as a chitta vipallasa. Because the initial gathering of information itself is wrong, and based upon that we were thinking, and that is also wrong. And ultimately we come to a conclusion that is also wrong. That is where what we call the ditti vipallasa, kind of distorted view. So these things are possible. So that's why we can't come to a definite conclusion that what I know, what I think, what I prefer is the only truth. Everything else is wrong. So we can't come to such kind of a conclusion. So at this level, the satchanurakkhana, the preserving of truth. So therefore Buddha's encouragement is to maintain kind of an open mind, give some space for further investigation. Don't stop where you are. So continue your investigation, continue your learning curve. And then the third one is called anussava. conviction through repeated hearing. Now, this is another method Buddha mentioned available in certain teachings. So there are certain sacred teachings taught by a particular person. We can say a religious leader, a spiritual teacher, and he may have kind of a marvelous qualities. And he is a kind of a charismatic character person, and therefore there may be many followers to him. And he has certain teachings, and now he is sharing that teaching with this particular group who are fairly like-minded, and they consider that teaching is the correct teaching. So they are reciting it again and again. So that group is like a cult group. So they are coming together and they are forming kind of a group. It has a teacher, and teacher is very much like the God or the main person, and they have strong belief on him. And again, the teaching that he is talking is constantly repeated, recited, so they all can remember. So this is another way of religious understanding or religious followers who are continuing their practice. So how about Buddha's teaching? How is it differ from this kind of a cult group? So actually, if you can remember, now when Buddha became enlightened, so who do you think that he kept as his teacher? Dhamma was kept as his teacher. Now, in this particular thing, in the Anussava, repeated hearing, there is a particular person, he is having his own different teachings, and he's the one who found it, and he never used that teaching as his teacher, rather he himself is the teacher, and he asked everyone to believe these teachings. So that is the typical Anussava part. But it differs from Buddha's teaching, where Buddha says, I also need a teacher, so I kept Dhamma as my teacher. I am living according to Dhamma. I am the Dhamma Swami. I am the one who, say, revealed the Dhamma. So Dhamma is my teacher. So that is one stand. And on the other hand, there are very other interesting suttas. So where Buddha encouraged even when he was about to die. Now, if you remember, there is one sutta called Gilana Sutta. At that time, Buddha was living in a village called Belua, and he was utterly sick. And he can't even walk, and he can't talk, and completely seriously sick. And Venerable Ananda is mentioning that later time, that Venerable Ananda couldn't realize Dhamma, or he can't remember the Dhamma, and he couldn't realize the directions because he was utterly panicked because of the Buddha's situation. By the way, Buddha decided at that time, okay, it is not proper for me to pass away, attain final parinibbana without addressing the monks, without addressing the attendants. So therefore, I better extend my lifespan a little bit further. So he make a kind of a determination, and then to some extent he has recovered. So the next day he was standing closer to that kind of a pagoda, in that shadow of the pagoda, and at that moment Venerable Ananda approached him, and now he is explaining, Bhante, I was utterly upset in today's terms by seeing your sick situation, your serious sickness, and I couldn't realize the directions. I was kind of completely confused. And by the way, I had a kind of a little consolation, thinking that Buddha may not give his teachings, last teachings to the Sangha. Without giving his last teachings to the Sangha, Buddha may not attain final parinibbana. That was the little consolation I had. So once Venerable Ananda mentioned that, now Buddha asking from Venerable Ananda that I haven't kept any kind of secret teachings with me. So Tathagata doesn't have any kind of teacher's fist, Gurumurti. So there is no any such kind of a Gurumurti for me. So I have explained Dhamma in detail. So what further are you expecting? So Ananda, Atta Deepa Viharata, Atta Sarana, Ananya Sarana. Dhamma Deepa, Dhamma Sarana, Ananya Sarana. So this is the very, very, very interesting statement here Buddha mentioned. So you have to make yourself as a refuge. You are the one, your own refuge. Nothing else. You have to keep Dhamma as the refuge. Dhamma as your kind of island and nothing else. Can someone say how Buddha refer how to maintain Dhamma as one's refuge? And Buddha is asking that question. How, Ananda, one is going to keep oneself as one's refuge, one's island, nothing else. Dhamma as one's reference or one's refuge, nothing else. How are you going to do that? So there Buddha mentioned, Idda bhikkhave bhikkhu kāye kāyanupassī vihirati ātāpi sampajāno satimā vinayya loke abhijjā domanassa. Vedananupassī vihirati ātāpi sampajāno satimā vinayya loke abhijjā domanassa. Chitte chittanupassī vihirati ātāpi sampajāno satimā vinayya loke abhijjā domanassa. Dhammesu dhammanupassī vihirati ātāpi sampajāno satimā vinayya loke abhijjā domanassa. So he refers satipatthana, the practice of mindfulness as the refuge. So you can see, so it is not that Buddha wants us to merely blindly follow him. Rather, he has given kind of a practical teaching and we have to take that as the refuge. And that has to be practiced. And that has to be lived within ourselves. Then we have to find our own refuge. So therefore, the responsibility is transferred to the follower. He hasn't kept that as a kind of his own type of reserved truth. Rather, he has transferred the responsibility to us. So we ourselves have to make ourselves as our own refuge. Dhamma as our own refuge. The practice as our own refuge. So therefore, there's a significant difference in Buddha's teaching with respect to this. So in the typical Anussava, the typical conviction through repeated hearing, and how Buddha's teaching differ has a significant difference. And on the other hand, now Buddha always encouraged the questioning and deep investigation. That is also there. So therefore, that aspect is also not available in this Anussava, typical Anussava. So anyway, anyone who simply hear a teaching and remembers that and use that as a way of preserving a truth. So Buddha's advice is, okay, you better continue that, but maintain kind of a open mind, because what you know, what you have heard, what you have repeated, what you have recited, might have the truth or might not have the truth. So that is related to Anussava, the third one. Then we come to the fourth one. Actually, these previous two, the Saddha and Ruchi, that is faith and our personal preference, are quite related to our own heart. So emotionally we can come to kind of a conclusion. The last two actually depending on our kind of intellectual capacity, kind of a cognitive things. So the fourth one, it is called Akara Parivitakka, the fourth. Conviction through recent thought. So you are recognizing certain teachings and you reflect about it. So when you are reflecting, what are the reasons that you are gathering? So as we discussed yesterday, so what are the controlling factor, or what are the contributing factors that you are selecting? So that is also fairly subjective. So we can't say that we have selected the best things, we have selected the precise things, so we can go wrong. So that is why the science sometimes change, every time change we can say. So one scientist may select certain, say, causes and he come to a conclusion. And another year, another scientist may select something else, and he actually challenge the previous solution or previous decision, previous conclusion. Therefore, we can't say it is therefore completely 100% correct. So our selection criteria is also fairly conditioned. Now, say for example, when you are selecting a particular person, a particular teacher, and Buddha say, sometimes we give more value to their appearance. Now say someone is walking very slowly and in a more decent manner, and wearing robes in a more decent manner, and talking very softly, and always use very mild words. What do you think? Can't he be an arahant? So don't you give marks to him? So probably, isn't it? Because that is how we define an arahant. So he can't get angry, and he always have to have loving kindness, and he maintain very pleasant attitude. He looks great. So this outer appearance is one thing. So we give a lot of value. That is one thing, what we call as rupappamana. And then Buddha mentioned the gosappamana. Say a teacher, a person who has a good reputation. So he is being venerated and he is being reputed, and many followers are there. He is having a lot of good reputation, and then yes, why not I also go to him? So he can be my teacher. So based on reputation, gosappamana. And then Buddha mentioned the lukappamana. Another monk, another person who is following very strict rules and following kind of self-mortification type of things, and he's going through a lot of Dhutanga practices, the austere practices. And if you look at him, probably he may be an arahant, rather than the person who is just living in the temple. So temple monks, not that good. So you can come to such kind of a conclusion, okay, the forest monks may be better than temple monks. So based on their, say, hard practice and their way of living, they may be very frugal and using very less things and going on pindapata. So you give a lot of marks to that and think, okay, he should be a good monk, but the other monk is not good. So likewise, our inner preference is there for this luka patipada, lukappamana. Buddha mentioned that. So we have kind of a preference for people who are maintaining such kind of a rigorous kind of practice, rigorous kind of lifestyle, and then we probably think, okay, he should be a good person. So based upon this kind of outer appearance, we come to certain conclusions. So therefore, even though we reflect, we probably have observed that person for a long time. And that is why we come to conclusion. So Buddha's advice here is, don't come to a conclusion. Keep an open mind. There could be truth there, or there can't be truth. There might not be truth there. So, and we had a very interesting point. Here also we can connect. So how, when someone is asking, so this is mentioned in Vimānsaka Sutta. Now, when a particular monk mean question about the Buddha, why you think Buddha is the supremely enlightened person, Samma Sambuddha? How are you going to say so? So if we ask the question from you, so how do we know that Buddha is the supremely enlightened teacher? How you verify that? Now, interestingly, these things are really discussed in the suttas. You can see, how beautiful in that sense. So nothing is hidden. You can see all these are very challenging questions, and these are really discussed in the suttas. So this Vimānsaka Sutta, Buddha is talking about that point. when a monk being questioned, how are you going to tell that Buddha is the supremely enlightened person? What is your evidence? What is your facts? So there Buddha mentioned, so he should have realized at least some part of Dhamma, what Buddha has mentioned. Based on that realization only he should say, yes, I have realized some part of Dhamma, but Buddha has mentioned. So it is not mere belief, but I have realized that part. Not the total thing, but at least some part I have realized. So that part is utterly correct. It is not mere belief. I know that. I have seen that. Based upon that, I can say, yes, Buddha is Samma Sambuddha. So you can see there also it is not mere belief that Buddha encourages. Rather, his teaching, at least to some extent, we have to realize. Based upon that realization only, Buddha say, you should be capable of telling, okay, I have realized that part. Therefore, I have no doubt about the Buddha. So therefore, it is not mere belief. It is not mere saddha. It is not mere logical, rational thinking. Rather, it is kind of a realization. Here also Buddha has encouraged. So before you come to that kind of a direct experience, direct realization, Buddha's advice here is to maintain an open mind. And then the last one. Last one is called Ditti Nijjhana Kanti. Conviction to a view after pondering it. How different views are available. Say, in the teachings, in the religious groups. So different teachings are available. They have their own views. And how are we going to verify that? So we may prefer a particular view. And then we take different factors from those views and we ourselves do kind of a rationalizing. And ultimately we come to a conclusion, okay, yes, that is the correct thing and I also have the same view. That is how we typically think. But here Buddha's advice is, don't come to a conclusion, even though it is mentioned, even though it is kind of mentioned as the proper view. So don't come to a conclusion. Because the realization hasn't happened. Realization has to happen within you. Till the realization happens within you, don't come to a conclusion. So the first part of this whole thing is therefore Buddha mentioned as Saccānurakkhana. So if you think that is correct, Buddha encourage you to learn, ponder, think about it, rationalize about it. So that is also necessary. Saccānurakkhana, protecting the truth, preserving the truth. He encourages that. But with an open mind, with an open attitude. And here actually we can connect another part. So how a person come to a kind of an investigation of Buddha's teaching. And here another term called Dhammanusari come into the picture. Now previously based on faith, we have the Saddhanusari. Here in this Ditti Nijjhana Kanti level, we can come to another person called Dhammanusari. So certain, as I mentioned, the important factor of Dhammanusari person, what we call as the person who is based upon the wisdom, is that his wisdom faculty is most prominent. Now, as I mentioned, they are not just words. So within himself, he understood that these different faculties are available. These qualities are available within me. Sometimes I have a lot of faith. Sometimes I have a lot of energy to practice, to learn. And sometimes I am quite mindful. Mindfulness is continuous. I have very sharp mindfulness. Sometimes, say, mind is well concentrated. I have a lot of samadhi, good samadhi. And sometimes mind is very penetrative, good wisdom. So likewise, within our own mind, if we are able to understand the appearance, availability of those qualities, then that means it is not kind of superficial. Using various methods, you are able to have those qualities. So therefore, this whole meditation practice, we can say, we are trying to develop those 5 faculties. Saddha, Viriya, Sati, Samadhi, Panya. Faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. So using various techniques. So we may have to develop Saddha, we have to develop effort, we have to develop mindfulness, we have to develop concentration, we have to develop wisdom. And when to some extent they are developed, now you can recognize, okay, now today I have a lot of faith. Today I have a lot of mindfulness, good mindfulness. Today I am not that mindful. Today my wisdom is really good. I can understand things very quickly. Others can't understand, but I quickly understood that. So today my mind is really penetrative, my mind is very sharp. So likewise within yourself, you understand the operation of these faculties. So when you come into that level, if wisdom is predominant, and through that wisdom, now you do some analysis, pondering of Buddha's teaching, and there you understand, yes, Buddha's teaching is correct. Example, as I mentioned, is that all 5 khandhas are impermanent. Say, form aggregate is impermanent, feeling aggregate is impermanent, perception aggregate is impermanent, formations aggregate is impermanent, consciousness aggregate is impermanent. So likewise, so based upon that wisdom faculty, you did some amount of analysis, and now you come to a conclusion, yes, Buddha's teaching is correct. Now, has he realized the Dhamma? Not yet. So that is why now Satchanu Rakkana, Satchanu Bodha, Satchanu Patti. Now still we are talking of Satchanu Rakkana. So this Saddhanusari, Dhammanusari both comes under the level of Satchanu Rakkana. And therefore it is also significant, isn't it? It is not mere superficial type of pondering. Rather, Buddha requires us to develop these faculties practically and within ourselves, and to recognize them separately. And if in a particular person this wisdom faculty is mostly predominant, and he come to a conclusion, yes, Buddha's teaching is correct, and fairly we can say he's a Dhammanusari person. Now, all above 5 actually, Saddha, Ruchi, Anussava, Akara Parivitakka, and Ditti Nijjhana Khanti. And all these 5 can be causes of clinging. Now, say for example, when we have a lot of faith on someone, so our mind go and attach to that particular person. We have a lot of faith on a particular teaching. We go and attach with that particular teaching. So we might have a lot of clinging related to this thing. And if we have kind of personal preference, personal desire onto something, again there can be kind of a clinging, grasping, upadana. And if you do some amount of pondering into a particular view, again we can go and grasp that, and it can become a ditti upadana. So therefore, there are certain bleachers here. All these 5 things are necessary. In order to preserve the truth, we have to follow these things. At least one of them we have to take and we have to follow. But there's a possibility of grasping. So that is the danger. So that is why Buddha refer here, just keep an open mind. Don't think this is the only correct thing. This is the only truth. Everything else is false. Don't come to that kind of a conclusion. Maintain a little bit of flexibility, even to change your conclusion. So, in the next level is where Buddha talks about Satchanu Bodha. Now, after mentioning all these 5 to this Kapatika, Buddha mentioned, this is the way I declare as Satchanu Rakkana. One has to follow these things, one has to do like this, but he only has preserved the truth, but he hasn't discovered the truth. Now suppose there are thousands of truths are available. and you have selected portion of that, 10 of that, and you do kind of an investigation of that. And that selected 10 of those teachings can have the truth and might not have the truth. Suppose that you have selected the correct ones. If you follow that, what is going to happen? One day you are going to realize that truth. So that is the part Buddha highlights as Satchanubodha. So we may have to start from what we have discussed. Either through the faith we are starting, either through our own preference, our desire we are starting, or either because we have heard repeated teaching we are starting, or because of our own thinking, our rational thinking, we may be starting. And we have seen that particular teachings are available, certain views are available, and based upon those views we thought about it and then we are starting. So all these possibilities are there. That is how we might have started. But all these are related to Satchanurakkhana, the first part. The second part is what we call as the Satchanubodha. Now, Satchanubodha requires a teacher. So that we can discuss tomorrow. So how to select a teacher. So this sutta is very interesting in that sense. So it gives a lot of inputs for us to our practice, as well as, finding proper teaching, proper teacher, and how ourselves have to get involved, how ourselves have to practice. So many things are there. So let's discuss that on tomorrow. And just to give a brief point, so Satchanubodha is the point where one becomes Sotapanna. So with that, I like to conclude today's Dhamma sermon, and we'll discuss that in detail on tomorrow. And thank you very much for attentive listening.